The convoy proceeded with measured steps through the oppressive darkness. 3 vessels, clearly of human construction, glided amongst the celestial bodies like weary wanderers on an interminable journey. From a distance they appeared diminished, ancient, almost melancholic. Their metallic exteriors bore the dull patina of age and numerous scuffs. Their propulsion systems emitted a faint, fatigued luminescence. No visible weaponry adorned their hulls, nor did any shields shimmer around them. In essence, nothing about these craft suggested a threat. This precisely aligned with the perception humanity aimed to cultivate throughout the galaxy. For nearly a century, humanity had been the most recent civilization to integrate into the broader cosmic community. They were regarded as nascent, inquisitive, and, above all, exceedingly courteous. Every initial encounter with an alien species followed a predictable pattern. A customary exchange, or the closest equivalent each species could manage, accompanied by offerings, carefully chosen words, and tentative smiles. Humanity dispatched scientific delegations, medical experts, and diplomats who spoke deliberately, prioritizing listening over speaking. This demeanor garnered widespread admiration. Many sentient races affectionately referred to them as the gentle ones. Conversely, a select few, in private discussions, privately derided humanity as naive, weak, and easily exploited. Such species harbored the conviction that a civilization perpetually advocating for peace would never resort to armed conflict. Commander Vestarn Callow harbored this conviction more profoundly than any other. Vest observed the modest human convoy on the primary display from the command deck of his warship, the Second Silence. His people, the Carol, belonged to an ancient and venerable race. They adhered to a singular principle above all others. Strength dictated all outcomes. To the Carol, peace was merely a stratagem employed by the feeble to delay their inevitable subjugation. 3 vessels, stated his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered officer named Dresch. No escort, no warships in proximity. Sensor readings indicate minimal armament. Vest permitted himself a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile, precisely as anticipated. For weeks, Carol scouts had meticulously tracked this convoy's trajectory through neutral interstellar territories. The humans characterized it as a diplomatic resupply mission, transporting sustenance, medical provisions, and commercial goods to a fledgling human settlement situated at the periphery of charted space. The absence of military craft, fighters included, underscored its vulnerability. This presented an ideal opportunity. Vess had spent years studying humanity, much like a predator observes its quarry. He was intimately familiar with their historical trajectory. He knew they had engaged in internecine conflicts long before venturing into the cosmos. However, since their integration into the galactic collective, humans had exhibited nothing but unwavering patience and conciliatory dialogue. They engaged in negotiations, sought compromises, and even offered apologies when entirely blameless. In Vess's estimation, this was not a display of integrity, but rather a facade of amiability masking profound weakness. Today, Vess declared softly, we shall seize a small portion of humanity's domain and finally ascertain their true value. His strategy was elegantly simple. The Carol Empire was experiencing a deficit in specific rare resources. Humanity, it transpired, controlled several lucrative trade routes and possessed technologies that could swiftly resolve this predicament, provided they were acquired through forceful intervention rather than protracted diplomatic discourse. The interception of a lightly guarded convoy would also serve as a potent declaration. Humanity was not to be treated with apprehension, but rather as a resource to be exploited. "Signal the fleet," Vess commanded. "Assume offensive positions. No warning volleys. We will neutralize their engines and commence boarding operations immediately." 3 Carl warships emerged from the darkness, akin to predators revealing their fangs. They dwarfed the human vessels, were heavily armored, and bristled with weaponry along every surface. Dresch observed the human convoy on the screen, anticipating a surge of panic. He expected them to scatter and flee. The human ships remained motionless. "Curious," Dresch murmured. "They have not altered course. They likely haven't detected us yet." "Humans are not renowned for their acute sensory perception," Vess stated. "Continue the approach." The Carroll ships closed the intervening distance, their weapons charging in boarding pods poised for deployment. Still, the human convoy drifted onward, maintaining its calm, unhurried pace, unchanged from its initial demeanor. No alarms blared, no formations shifted. No indication of apprehension was evident. "Initiate disabling fire upon the lead vessel's propulsion systems," Vess ordered. "No further action. We require it to be intact." Brilliant energy bolts traversed the void and impacted the lead human ship's aft section. Sparks erupted outwards. The engine flared, then subsided, and finally went completely dark. The vessel decelerated to a drift, rendered powerless, precisely as orchestrated. "Excellent," Vess proclaimed. "Prepare the boarding parties." 3 boarding pods detached from the Carroll warships, slicing through space towards the disabled human vessel. Within each pod, clad Carroll soldiers verified their weaponry, eager for a facile engagement. They anticipated confronting terrified diplomats, perhaps a handful of unarmed crew members cowering in recesses. Nothing more. The pods impacted the human ship's hull with a resounding clang, and within seconds had breached the outer plating. Carroll soldiers stormed through the breach, weapons raised, prepared for any resistance. They found none. The corridors were devoid of life. Dim overhead lights flickered, casting elongated shadows. No footsteps echoed, no voices carried, no crew members were present. The soldiers advanced deeper into the ship, systematically clearing each compartment, discovering only empty containers and silent, darkened passageways. "Report," Vess demanded via comms, his impatience mounting. "The vessel is unoccupied, Commander," came the reply, confusion palpable in the soldier's voice. "No crew located, no diplomats, no cargo of any significant value, merely empty crates." Vess's smile dissolved. "Empty? Yes, Commander. It appears to be." The soldier's voice abruptly ceased. Static filled the comm channel for a single, prolonged, unsettling second. Then a new voice emerged. It was composed, steady, and undeniably human. "You have made an error," the voice stated. Every officer on the Second Silence's bridge swiveled their attention toward the comm speaker. Vess remained frozen, fixated on it, as if the disembodied voice might materialize in the room. "Identify yourself," Vess commanded curtly. My designation is of little consequence at this juncture, the voice responded. It carried an almost weary tone, akin to someone explaining a concept they had reiterated numerous times. What is paramount is your recent action. You have assaulted an unarmed convoy. You have infiltrated a civilian vessel, and you have done so under the assumption that there would be no repercussions. Vess's grip tightened on the armrest of his command chair. This is now human territory, subject to negotiation, not intimidation. Surrender your remaining vessels, and we may yet discuss terms. A brief silence ensued. Then, almost gently, the voice continued. There are no other vessels to negotiate with, Commander. There never were. On the main screen, sensor readings suddenly surged with new data. Dozens of small return signals blossomed across the darkness like nascent stars igniting, appearing seemingly from nowhere, encircling the Carroll fleet from all vectors. Warships. Human warships. Sleek, dark, and swift, their hulls no longer obscured by antiquated camouflage systems. They had been present the entire duration, cloaked, awaiting the opportune moment, exhibiting remarkable patience. Impossible, Dresch whispered, his eyes wide, fixed on the screen. Our sensors detected nothing. Your sensors detected precisely what we intended them to, the human voice stated calmly. You have been proceeding into this scenario for 3 weeks, Commander. Every scout you dispatched, every transmission you intercepted, every vulnerable convoy you tracked, we permitted you to observe it all. All of it deliberately guiding you here. Vess's chest tightened. You knew. You knew we were coming. We did more than merely know. We invited you. A profound silence descended upon the bridge of the second silence. No one stirred. No one spoke. Every officer gazed at the formidable array of human warships now surrounding them, their armaments powering up, their engines glowing, with barely contained energy. After a considerable pause, the human voice resumed its discourse. The galaxy has observed our dispatch of physicians in lieu of soldiers, of diplomats rather than warriors. Many species interpreted this as an indication of our inability to engage in conflict. Some believed it signified our reluctance to do so. You harbored the same conviction when you targeted this convoy, envisioning a straightforward acquisition with no attendant cost or consequences. Vess remained silent. His hands began to tremble, though he strove to conceal this from his crew. You were mistaken, the voice stated with simple finality. And you shall now learn the precise magnitude of your error. A novel light emanated from the human warships. Not weapon fire, not yet, but something altogether different. Targeting locks, dozens of them, simultaneously acquiring every Carroll ship with unwavering precision. Commander, Dresch's voice cracked with sudden alarm. They have achieved full weapons lock on all 3 of our vessels. Shields, engines, and weapon arrays, on everything. Vess stared at the screen, his mind racing. The Carroll had arrived, anticipating an effortless triumph over a placid, benevolent species that favored discourse over combat. Instead, they had inadvertently blundered into a meticulously crafted snare, embodying patience, discipline, and an unnerving, calm exactitude that unsettled him far more than any display of overt aggression ever could. This is a war crime, Vess declared, though his voice lacked its former assuredness. attacking us in this manner after luring us in." "No, Commander," the voice interrupted, its tone still measured and steady. "A war crime is boarding an unarmed convoy and threatening individuals you believed incapable of resistance. What follows is merely the consequence of that action." For the first time since entering the system, an unfamiliar sensation crept into Vest's chest. Fear. "Cease all weapon activity," the voice commanded. "Release your boarding parties back to your vessels and transmit this directive, verbatim, to your empire." The galaxy anticipated diplomacy from Earth. Henceforth, Earth shall dictate when diplomacy is extended and when it is withheld. Vest surveyed his bridge. His officers regarded him expectantly, awaiting orders, a strategy, some ingenious maneuver that might salvage the present predicament. However, no such ingenious move remained. The human fleet now held every conceivable advantage: strategic positioning, numerical superiority, and a far more formidable asset than either: the irrefutable truth that humanity was never truly weak. They had simply been biding their time. "Cease all operations," Vest commanded quietly. "All vessels stand down weapons." The order permeated the ship like a ponderous weight settling upon every soul aboard. One by one, the Carroll warships lowered their armaments, their engines flickering as offensive systems deactivated throughout the fleet. On the human flagship, concealed within that formidable ring of dark, patient warships, a junior officer turned to her commander, observing the Carroll fleet power down on the main display. "They are standing down," she reported. The commander offered a small, satisfied nod, her gaze still fixed on the screen. Good. Was this always the plan? To allow them to attack an empty vessel solely to expose their entire fleet? It was one contingency, the commander stated simply. We had hoped it would not be necessary. However, the galaxy required a lesson eventually, and it appears the Kurl Empire volunteered to be the first recipient. The junior officer studied the screen for another moment, observing the incapacitated Kurl warships, drifting silently, completely surrounded. "They believe this is over," she remarked. "One convoy, one lesson, and it concludes there." The commander allowed a subtle, thin smile to grace her lips, devoid of anger, radiating only quiet certainty. "It is not over," the commander declared. "It is merely the commencement." News of this event will disseminate across the galaxy within days. And when it does, every civilization observing will be compelled to confront the same inquiry that the Carroll have just learned the hard way. "What inquiry is that?" the junior officer asked. The commander's eyes remained fixed on the screen, observing the powerless fleet drifting in silence. "What transpires," the commander stated softly, "when the gentle ones cease to be gentle?" Far across the vast expanse of the galaxy, the message would soon reach Carroll Command, bearing words no empire had ever anticipated receiving from Earth. And far beyond that, on distant worlds governed by other proud, ancient civilizations, rumors would begin to circulate. Initially, faint whispers, then growing louder, until they became impossible to disregard. Humanity had not initiated this conflict. However, they had just made it unequivocally clear that they would bring it to its conclusion. Within hours, news of the failed incursion reached Carroll High Command. Initially, disbelief was the prevailing sentiment. The message arrived through official channels, utilizing the Empire's own communication protocols, verified and stamped as authentic. Nevertheless, the officers who first perused it remained frozen at their stations, rereading the words repeatedly, as if mere repetition might alter their meaning. 3 warships, full weapons lock, incapacitated, standing down, not a single shot fired. In the Grand Command Hall of Carsoon, the Carroll homeworld, High Marshal Orek Velden examined the report 3 times before finally placing it on his desk. He was an elder warrior, his visage etched with scars from 100 conflicts, his voice deep and measured, carrying the weight of decades spent subjugating lesser species across numerous star systems. "Explain this to me once more," Orek commanded, fixing his gaze upon the young officer standing before him. Commander Vest deployed 3 warships against an unarmed convoy, and somehow his entire fleet found itself surrendering without a single shot discharged? "Yes, High Marshal," the officer replied, clearly uncomfortable delivering such news. The convoy was a deliberate trap. Human warships were cloaked in the vicinity, awaiting deployment. They permitted our fleet to engage the empty vessel, then completely encircled us before revealing their presence. Orek's jaw tightened. And Commander Vest failed to detect any of this beforehand? No signals were detected until the humans chose to reveal them, High Marshal. Their cloaking technology appears to be significantly more advanced than our previous assessments indicated. Orek rose slowly from his chair, approaching the expansive window overlooking the capital city below. Towers of dark metal stretched towards the heavens, monumental structures erected to commemorate centuries of Carroll military triumphs. His people had never experienced defeat in war, not once, not against any species they had ever encountered. The notion that a gentle civilization like humanity could outwit and outmaneuver an entire Carroll strike fleet felt almost preposterous to accept. "Retrieve all available data pertaining to humans," Orek instructed quietly. "Every scrap of information. Their history, their culture, every report from every diplomat and scout who has ever studied them. I require a comprehensive understanding of precisely who we are truly dealing with." Hours later, Orek sat in solitude within a hushed records chamber, surrounded by data screens displaying reports accumulated over decades. An elderly advisor named Thesicor, one of the few Carroll scholars with extensive knowledge of humans, stood nearby, patiently observing as Orek perused file after file. "Tell me what you genuinely comprehend," Orek finally stated without looking up. "Not the official communiques, but your actual beliefs." Thesicor considered her words with great care before speaking. She had earned Orek's profound trust over many years, and understood he valued candor above comforting falsehoods. "Humans are unlike any civilization we have previously encountered," she began. "When they first entered galactic society, nearly everyone anticipated they would behave like every other new species preceding them, eager to demonstrate strength, quick to adopt aggressive postures, swift to issue threats. Instead, they did precisely the opposite. They dispatched scientists, they sent medical personnel, they posed inquiries before issuing demands. Weakness, Orek interjected with a low murmur. That is what many perceived, Thesicor stated cautiously. However, I delved into their historical records prior to their venturing amongst the stars, High Marshal, and what I discovered caused me considerable disquiet. Orek finally raised his gaze. Disquiet? In what manner? Humanity engaged in warfare amongst themselves for millennia before achieving planetary unity, Thesacor explained. Not minor skirmishes, but colossal conflicts waged across their entire world, involving weaponry capable of rendering their own civilization extinct on multiple occasions. They came perilously close to self-annihilation more than once. And yet they persevered, Orek observed. They persevered, Thesacor concurred. And more than that, they transformed. Following immense destruction, human societies began to foster collaboration rather than perpetual conflict. They established shared legal frameworks, engaged in mutual trade. Gradually, painstakingly, they coalesced into a single, unified species long before other worlds were even aware of their existence. Orek leaned back in his chair, contemplating this revelation. So, their present calm, peaceful demeanor is not a consequence of an inability to fight. No, High Marshal, Thesacor replied softly. I believe it stems from their profound understanding of the ultimate cost of conflict. They have already borne that price once, amongst themselves. Perhaps they simply prefer to avoid incurring it again, unless absolutely compelled to do so. The room fell into a prolonged silence. There is an additional element, Thesacor added carefully. Something mentioned in scouting reports on more than one occasion, though few have given it serious consideration. Proceed, Orek prompted. Rumors, she stated. Whispers from smaller civilizations that have interacted with humans along their border worlds. They describe something profoundly unsettling about humanity's response when genuinely provoked. Not rage, not chaos, but something more chilling, more precise. Orek's eyes narrowed. Precise in what way? One report detailed a border engagement decades ago involving a minor pirate faction that attacked a human trading outpost. Thesacor recounted. The assault was minimal, even by galactic standards. Yet the human response was swift, exact, and absolute. The pirate faction was not merely defeated, it was eradicated entirely. Vessels, bases, supply chains all vanished within weeks, with virtually no losses on the human side. You deem this report credible? I believe, Thesacor stated slowly, that humans do not perceive warfare as we do, High Marshal. We fight for honor, for territory, for the assertion of strength. Humans, when finally compelled to engage in combat, appear to fight solely for one singular objective, to ensure that the threat never recurs. Orek rose once more, pacing slowly across the chamber, his mind actively processing every detail he had just absorbed. And you believe Commander Vess's fleet triggered precisely this kind of response? I believe, Thesacor stated with careful deliberation, that we may have just convinced an entire species, one that has spent nearly a century attempting to demonstrate its desire for peace, that peace is no longer a viable option to extend to us. Far across the galaxy, aboard the human flagship Meridian, preparations proceeded with quiet, unwavering discipline. Fleet Admiral Sarah Cole stood on the bridge, observing reports scroll across her screen. The captured Carroll fleet had been released, their engines restored, their weaponry still disabled, and sent homeward bearing Earth's message verbatim. Every officer aboard the Meridian fully comprehended the implications of that message. This was no longer an isolated incident. It marked the genesis of something far more significant. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Ryo Tanaka stated, stepping to her side. "Command requests confirmation before we proceed further. They are inquiring if we are certain the Carroll Empire will escalate." Admiral Cole's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "They will. How can you be so certain?" "Because every piece of data we have gathered about them points to precisely who they are," Cole explained. "The Carroll Empire has not suffered a defeat in over 300 years. Their entire cultural identity is founded upon strength and dominance. A setback such as this, particularly one delivered without a single shot fired, represents more than just a military loss to them. And what does it represent then? It is an affront to their very being," Cole declared softly. "And wounded pride in a species built entirely on the principle of strength does not lead to placid acceptance. It instigates retaliation." Tanaka's brow furrowed slightly. "So we have exacerbated the situation." "No," Cole stated firmly. "We have clarified the situation." She turned to face him fully now, her expression composed yet serious. "For nearly a century, we have extended patience to every civilization we have encountered. We have consistently offered peace first, every single time. Even when some species tested our resolve, provoked us, or dismissed us as weak. That patience was never a deficiency, Lieutenant. It was a conscious choice. And now the Carroll Empire has demonstrated precisely how they intend to treat that patience going forward. This signifies that it is time the remainder of the galaxies learns something crucial about humanity. And what is that, ma'am?" Cole's gaze returned to the screen, observing the quiet reports of Carroll fleet movements gathering near their border, precisely as she had anticipated. "We choose peace first," she stated, "always. But we have never asserted that we are incapable of choosing otherwise." Back on Carsoon, High Marshal Oryx stood before the assembled Carroll War Council. Dozens of high-ranking officers were present to hear his assessment. Every gaze in the chamber was fixed upon him, a collective stillness, anticipating either condemnation or a directive for action against this unforeseen indignity. Commander Vess's armada had been released without harm. Oryx's voice resonated clearly throughout the hall, stating, "No personnel lost, no soldiers apprehended." Every vessel was reinstated and dispatched home, bearing naught but a singular message. A ripple of hushed discourse swept through the council, and numerous officers exchanged bewildered glances. "They permitted our departure?" one inquired, the question hanging in the air. Why would they extend such clemency if their intent was to imperil us? Oryx's countenance remained impassive, his thoughts obscured. "I do not believe clemency played any part in this matter." "Then what?" "I surmise," Oryx elaborated at a measured pace, "that Earth desired our return precisely as we departed, unharmed and utterly disgraced. A vanquished fleet limping home, its spirit broken but its materiel intact, delivers a far more potent message than a fleet that has been annihilated." A profound silence descended upon the hall. "They are communicating with us," Oryx continued, "not through threats nor through violence, but through composed, deliberate conduct. They wish us to comprehend, with absolute clarity, that they foresaw this assault from its inception permitted it to unfold precisely as they willed, and concluded it precisely when they ordained. A junior officer stepped forward, his frustration palpable. Then we shall retaliate with our full might. We shall demonstrate the true power of the Carol Imperium. And we will walk directly into whatever stratagem they have already devised for that very response. Oryx interjected sharply. Do you still not grasp the significance of what has transpired? The younger officer fell silent, abashed. Oryx surveyed the room deliberately, meeting the eyes of each officer present. For a century we have held the belief that humanity was merely an adolescent, naive civilization playing at diplomacy due to their perceived lack of martial capability. We were mistaken. They were never incapable of conflict. They were simply choosing repeatedly not to engage. And now, owing to Commander Vess's actions, he paused, allowing the gravity of his next declaration to permeate the room. They may no longer be making that choice concerning us. The hall remained steeped in silence, every officer now comprehending the full import of the events. This was not a simple military setback, but potentially the precipice of a conflict against an adversary far more calculating, far more patient, and infinitely more formidable than any within the Imperium had ever conceived possible. Far from the confines of Carel territory, near the tranquil frontier separating the empires, human fleets continued to assemble in meticulously disciplined formations, poised for whatever lay ahead. Their readiness was not born of anger or apprehension, but of the same serene, unyielding patience that had characterized humanity's engagement with the cosmos since its very dawn. The sole alteration now was the purpose for which that patience was being honed. 3 weeks elapsed following Commander Vess's ignominious return. 3 weeks of hushed anticipation, mounting tension, and quiet preparations on either side of the widening chasm between the Carel Imperium and Earth. High Marshal Oryx had advocated for circumspection before the War Council. Yet prudence was a concept the Carel Imperium struggled to embrace. Their pride was deeply ingrained in their culture, eclipsing logic and fear. A humiliated fleet could not simply return and be forgotten. Restitution was demanded. Consequently, against Oryx's counsel, the War Council sanctioned a new offensive. A strike force 5 times the magnitude of Vess's initial fleet was to be deployed against a human frontier outpost, designated New Halden, a modest mining settlement situated on the periphery of human dominion. Its defenses were sparse, its mineral wealth significant, and its proximity to Carel space conducive to a swift and decisive engagement. This time, there would be no unsuspecting convoy to ensnare. This time, the Carel Imperium intended to definitively prove that humanity's prior maneuver had been a mere stroke of luck, nothing more. Fleet Commander Dressa Cor Van Til, an officer renowned for her assertive strategies and unwavering confidence, personally led the assault. She had eagerly sought this command, driven by a desire to expunge the disgrace Vess had inflicted upon the Imperium. This time, Dressa informed her officers as their fleet approached human airspace. There will be no concealed vessels, no cunning stratagems, merely a confrontation of power against power. We shall remind the galaxy who truly commands authority here. Her armada comprised 15 heavily fortified warships, considerably larger than any vessels Vess had commanded. Long-range sensors continuously scanned the path ahead, seeking any indication of stealth-equipped human craft lying in ambush. Scans reveal no anomalies, reported her sensor operator. The new Halden colony presents as anticipated. Minimal defenses, a scattering of small patrol craft, and no warship presence detected within operational range. Dressa permitted herself a triumphant smile. Excellent. Let us commence. Aboard the human colony of New Halden, life proceeded with its customary quietude. Miners toiled deep beneath the surface, extracting precious minerals from ancient geological strata. Families strolled through verdant parks enclosed by protective atmospheric domes. Children's laughter echoed in open courtyards, bathed in artificial sunlight meticulously calibrated to emulate the warmth of distant Earth. Unbeknownst to them, a subtle tension was building far above their heads, where a discreet contingent of human officers monitored deep space telemetry from a concealed command center buried deep within the colony's subterranean infrastructure. Confirmed, stated Colonel Elena Reyes, observing the precise sensor readings as they unfurled across her display. The Carroll strike fleet is inbound. 15 warships adhering strictly to the projected trajectory. Standing beside her, Admiral Cole nodded slowly, unsurprised by the intelligence. As anticipated, High Marshal Oryx cautioned against this escalation, but the War Council opted for a more robust response, driven by pride. They remain unaware of our forces? Reyes inquired. Indeed, Cole affirmed, and they shall continue to be so until we deem otherwise. New Holden's actual defenses extend far beyond a few minor patrol craft. Concealed deep within adjacent asteroid fields and meticulously masked by advanced stealth technology, an entire human battle fleet has been strategically positioned for the past 3 weeks, awaiting their arrival. They believe this colony defenseless, just as they perceived the convoy to be. We shall permit that illusion to persist for precisely as long as it serves our objectives. The Carroll fleet entered the New Holden system with an overwhelming sense of confidence, their weaponry armed, boarding crews prepared, and formation impeccably tight. Commander Dressa observed the diminutive human colony ahead, its faint defensive shields barely registering on her sensors. Such a small, vulnerable world, she murmured. And they dared to humiliate us with their deceptions and hidden fleets. Let us ascertain how astute they remain now, facing true power head-on. Orders, Commander, inquired her weapons officer. Disrupt their shield generators initially, Dressa commanded, then proceed directly into orbit. We shall demand their capitulation. Should they refuse, we shall commence the bombardment of their mining installations until compliance is achieved. The Carroll fleet advanced steadily, their weapons locking onto the colony's modest shield array. Bolts of energy streaked across the void, impacting the shields with substantial, focused force. Fragments of disintegrating technology scattered outwards as the shields rapidly weakened under the onslaught. Shields at 40%, reported Dressa's sensor officer. Colony defenses appear minimal, precisely as predicted. Dressa's lips curved into a cold smile. Continue the assault. However, as the Carroll armaments discharged once more, an unexpected occurrence transpired. The very fabric of the stars seemed to distort. All around the Corel fleet, the void rippled and shimmered as dozens of concealed human warships, simultaneously decloaked, materializing not from a single direction, but from every conceivable vector, above, below, and on all sides of the astonished Corel formation. "Commander!" shouted Dressa's sensor officer, alarm evident in his voice. Multiple contacts decloaking all around us. At least 30 vessels, possibly more. Dressa's confident smile vanished instantly. Impossible. Our scans revealed nothing. They were present the entire time, the officer stated, his voice trembling slightly. Hidden within the asteroid field surrounding the system. Their cloaking technology must be so advanced that it can deceive even our closest range sensors. Dressa's grip tightened on the armrests of her command chair. She had anticipated trickery, expected concealed vessels somewhere within the system. But this, an entire fleet, exceeding the size of her own, perfectly positioned to envelop her from every angle without the slightest warning. This she had not prepared for. "All ships defensive posture," Dressa ordered sharply. "Raise shields. Prepare for." Before she could complete her command, the human fleet unleashed their barrage. Unlike the conventional Corel tactics, which relied heavily on rigid formations and synchronized group assaults, the human vessels maneuvered with startling autonomy. Each ship seemed to operate on its own initiative, striking with precision at vulnerabilities within the Corel shield arrays, then swiftly withdrawing before counterfire could engage them, only to strike again moments later from an entirely different vantage point. "They are not fighting as a unified fleet," Dressa's tactical officer observed, watching in disbelief. "They are engaging like individual predators, each selecting their own targets. One Corel cruiser, caught unawares by 3 separate assaults from disparate directions within mere seconds, had its primary shields entirely compromised. Before its crew could react, a solitary human destroyer closed the distance, striking directly at its weapon systems with remarkable accuracy, disabling the cruiser almost completely without outright destroying it. "They are disabling our vessels, not destroying them," Dressa realized aloud, observing the pattern repeating across her battle display. Precisely as they did with Vess's fleet. "Commander, an incoming transmission," her communications officer reported. Dressa hesitated for only a moment before responding. "Patch it through." The same calm, steady human voice that had previously addressed Vess now spoke directly to Dressa. "Commander Dressa Cor Van Til," the voice stated, devoid of anger or mockery, merely observation. "You have brought 15 warships to assault an undefended civilian colony. We extend to you the same opportunity we offered Commander Vess." "And what opportunity is that?" Dressa demanded, though her voice had lost much of its prior assurance. "Surrender your armaments," the voice replied simply. "Power down your offensive systems, and we shall permit your fleet to withdraw, precisely as we did previously." Dressa's jaw clenched. Every instinct within her, every lesson learned throughout her extensive military career, screamed in opposition to such a directive. Capitulation was not a notion the Corel Imperium readily accepted, particularly not a second time in succession against the same adversary. "And if we refuse?" she inquired. A brief silence ensued before the human voice responded, its tone as placid as ever. "Then we shall disable your entire fleet by force, Commander. The outcome will be identical regardless. The sole variable is the number of your personnel you wish to see needlessly injured prior to that conclusion." Dressa gazed at her tactical display, watching helplessly as human vessels systematically dismantled her fleet's defenses, one ship at a time, with unnerving, mechanical precision. Already, 6 of her 15 warships had lost their primary weapon systems entirely. 2 more had suffered engine failure, drifting powerlessly amidst the unfolding chaos. "This is not honorable combat," Dressa stated bitterly. "You conceal yourselves. You employ deception. You strike from the shadows rather than confronting us directly. Honor, as you define it, cost you nothing when you attacked an unarmed convoy weeks ago," the voice replied evenly. "It seems peculiar to invoke it now, when assaulting an undefended mining colony." Dressa had no rejoinder for this. She stared silently at the display, observing her fleet disintegrate ship by ship, finally comprehending the impossible truth Vess had uncovered weeks prior. This was not a contest they could win through sheer martial strength alone. "Stand down," Dressa finally commanded, her voice laden with reluctant defeat. "All ships, immediately power down offensive systems." One by one, the remaining Karel warships ceased their assault, their weaponry falling silent across the battered fleet. The human vessels, still completely surrounding them, maintained their position steadily, allowing the vanquished Karel fleet to drift silently amidst the debris of their own ambition. Aboard the Meridian, observing the conclusion of the engagement from her command chair, Admiral Cole allowed herself a faint, satisfied exhalation, though her expression remained composed and controlled. "Second Fleet neutralized," Lieutenant Tanaka reported. "Minimal damage incurred on our side. No fatalities reported. Casualties among Karel forces? Moderate," Tanaka stated. "Several vessels sustained damage, and some personnel reported injuries, but no confirmed fatalities." Cole nodded slowly, her satisfaction mingling with a quiet resolve. "Send them home, precisely as we did before. Allow them to carry this defeat back to their Imperium themselves." "Do you believe they will attempt a third time?" Tanaka inquired. Cole considered this thoughtfully. "Pride is a potent force, Lieutenant, especially for a species that has never known true defeat until now. They may indeed try again, perhaps with an even larger contingent. And if they do?" Cole's gaze remained unwavering, fixed on the drifting wreckage of the Karel fleet outside. "Then we shall be waiting for them once more. Exactly as we were today. But how much longer can we continue to respond in this manner?" Tanaka pressed carefully. "Disabling their fleets, sending them home, hoping they eventually comprehend the message." Cole finally turned to face him directly, her expression serious and contemplative. "We are not merely hoping they comprehend a message, Lieutenant. We are demonstrating something far more significant." "And what is that, ma'am?" "That Earth's patience," Cole stated quietly, "was never a weakness to be exploited. It was a deliberate choice we made, and one we remain fully capable of setting aside whenever necessity dictates." She turned back toward the viewport, watching silently as the defeated Karel fleet commenced its slow, humiliated retreat towards their own territory. Sooner or later, Cole continued, almost to herself, every species we encounter must learn this fundamental lesson. Some learn swiftly through judicious diplomacy and mutual regard. Others, regrettably, require more arduous instruction before true understanding takes root. And the Corel Imperium? Cole's expression hardened slightly, though her voice remained calm and measured. The Corel Imperium, it appears, requires the most arduous lesson of all. Far beyond New Halden's orbital perimeter, as the defeated fleet limped homeward once more, news of this second humiliating setback began to disseminate rapidly across Corel territory, reaching every segment of their proud, ancient empire, and soon extending far beyond, towards every species observing closely to ascertain precisely how humanity's patience might ultimately be tested to its limit. Word of the second defeat cascaded through the Corel Imperium like wildfire through parched foliage. Within days, every significant world under Corel dominion had received some rendition of the account. 15 warships dispatched to subdue a small, undefended mining colony, utterly humiliated, without a single confirmed casualty, returned bearing naught but shame and a repeated warning. For a civilization that had not experienced true defeat in over 3 centuries, this second failure resonated far more profoundly than the first. Whispers began to circulate within Corel society. Quiet inquiries posed in private that no one dared voice publicly. Had the Imperium finally encountered something it could not simply overcome through brute force? High Marshal Oryx felt the oppressive weight of these whispers as he once again stood before the War Council, presenting his report on Commander Dressa's failed offensive. 2 fleets, Oryx stated grimly, addressing the assembled officers. 2 defeats, neither achieved through overwhelming force, deception, or superior numbers, both accomplished through patience, precision, and absolute restraint. Restraint? Scoffed General Torv, one of the Imperium's most venerable and aggressive commanders. They encircled and incapacitated our fleets entirely. You term this restraint? I do indeed, Oryx responded firmly. In both encounters, the humans possessed a decisive advantage. They could have utterly annihilated our fleets, eradicating every soldier aboard. Instead, they disabled our weaponry, permitted our vessels to retreat, and dispatched us homeward with nothing more than a message. Then they are fools, Torv retorted. Mercy shown to an enemy is mercy squandered. Or, Oryx stated quietly, it is a warning, a demonstration of precisely how much destructive capability they currently choose not to wield against us. Silence permeated the hall as the gravity of Oryx's words settled completely. Far across the galaxy, aboard Earth's orbital command station, positioned high above their homeworld, a different kind of deliberation was underway. Quieter, more composed, yet carrying implications as significant as any discussed within the Corel halls. President Elena Marsh presided at the head of a long conference table, flanked by Earth's senior military and political leadership. Admiral Cole had returned from the front lines specifically for this assembly. She now stood before a large display, showcasing comprehensive reports from both engagements with Corel forces. 2 assaults in less than a month, President Marsh remarked, meticulously examining the reports. First an unarmed convoy, now a civilian mining colony. Both attacks launched without prior warning, without provocation, and without any attempt at diplomatic overture beforehand. Correct, Cole confirmed. Carrel reconnaissance reports suggest they perceived both targets as easily exploitable opportunities, based entirely on decades of observing Earth's diplomatic posture toward other species. They presumed our patience signified weakness, stated General Marcus Webb, seated near the president. Much as several other species assumed the same when we first entered galactic society. President Marsh nodded slowly, her expression pensive. This is not the first instance we have encountered this assumption, but it may be the most perilous manifestation yet. And why is that? Inquired Secretary of Defense Amara Chen. Because the Carrel Imperium has never sustained a defeat in over 3 centuries, Marsh explained. Their entire societal structure, their cultural identity, their very essence is predicated on martial supremacy. A species that has never experienced true defeat rarely accepts one with grace, particularly not twice in succession. Cole concurred with a nod. Our intelligence indicates a rapidly intensifying internal pressure within Carrel leadership. Numerous officers are advocating for an even more significant retaliatory measure, unwilling to concede 2 humiliating defeats without further escalation. Then, we should anticipate a 3rd assault, Webb stated grimly, likely far exceeding the scale of the previous 2. Almost certainly, Cole agreed. President Marsh leaned back in her chair, carefully considering the situation before speaking again. This presents a crucial question for all of us. To what extent are we prepared to demonstrate restraint should this pattern of escalation persist? The room fell silent, each leader contemplating the profound weight of this inquiry. May I share a piece of information with the Council? Cole requested after a prolonged pause. Please do, Marsh replied. Cole activated the display behind her, bringing up an antiquated historical file dated decades prior, long before Earth had even made contact with its first extraterrestrial civilization. Many of you are familiar with humanity's history prior to our stellar expansion, Cole began. Centuries of internecine conflict, culminating eventually in wars capable of imperiling our entire civilization's survival. We approached the precipice of self-annihilation on more than one occasion. Several officers nodded solemnly, cognizant of this somber chapter in human history. Following our most devastating conflicts, Cole continued, humanity made a profoundly deliberate choice. Humanity has established new global statutes, developed fresh frameworks for accountability, and devised entirely novel methods for resolving conflicts without resorting to immediate hostilities. This transformation, spanning numerous generations, ultimately imparted a crucial understanding to humankind. Patience and diplomacy effectively avert needless suffering far more proficiently than immediate military action. This profound lesson fundamentally shaped our interaction with other sentient species once we ventured into the cosmos. Mars, interjected someone, precisely grasping the direction of Cole's discourse. Precisely, Cole affirmed. When we first integrated into the galactic community, virtually every species anticipated that we would follow their established norms, swiftly asserting dominance through demonstrations of power. Instead, we deliberately embraced patience, a choice born from the harsh lessons of our own traumatic history. However, Chen observed with measured precision, patience without boundaries can unfortunately invite exploitation. Indeed, Cole concurred. And this precisely represents the equilibrium we have diligently maintained since our admission into the Galactic Federation. We consistently extend an offer of peace, always. Yet, we have never pretended to be incapable of enacting decisive measures when that peace is repeatedly and intentionally jeopardized. President Marsh meticulously reviewed the historical documentation before speaking again. "There is something further you wish to impart, is there not, Admiral?" Cole responded with a slow nod. "Yes, something few individuals beyond the highest echelons of command are fully privy to." She activated another file, this one significantly more recent, detailing a prior incident from several years earlier. 6 years ago, Cole elaborated, a less prominent species known as the Dren launched an assault on one of our peripheral research facilities. They mistakenly believed, much like the Krell currently do, that our diplomatic approach signified vulnerability rather than a conscious decision. A few individuals exchanged puzzled glances, clearly unfamiliar with this particular event. The attack resulted in the tragic loss of 11 researchers, Cole continued, her voice imbued with somber gravity. Earth initially responded through diplomatic channels, seeking formal accountability and reparations via peaceful negotiation. "And the Dren refused?" Webb inquired. "Worse," Cole stated. "They publicly agreed to negotiations while secretly orchestrating a second, larger offensive against a nearby colony, convinced that our diplomatic overture was itself a sign of weakness, not genuine goodwill." The atmosphere in the room grew noticeably tense, with everyone immediately comprehending the trajectory of the narrative. Upon discovering their deceit, Cole pressed on, Earth's response was swift, precise, and absolute. Within 3 weeks, the Dren's military capacity was utterly dismantled. This was achieved not through excessive violence, but by systematically eradicating every asset capable of enabling future aggression. Their warships, weapon manufacturing capabilities, military communication networks, all entirely eliminated. "And the Dren homeworld itself?" Chen asked carefully. "Undisturbed," Cole replied. The civilian populations remained entirely unharmed throughout the entire operation. However, the Dren's ability to wage war against any entity, ever again, was permanently eradicated. A profound silence descended upon the room as the full implications of this revelation settled deeply among Earth's leadership. "This incident was deliberately kept confidential," Marsh explained, observing the surprised expressions around her. "Not to conceal what transpired, but because publicizing it risked reinforcing dangerous misconceptions about humanity's capabilities among other galactic species. But now," Cole stated quietly, "given the developing pattern with the Krell Empire, perhaps mere quiet restraint is no longer sufficient." President Marsh considered this carefully, fully understanding Cole's implication. "You believe we need to establish a more explicit policy," Marsh stated. "Something more definitive than isolated incidents handled discreetly." "I do," Cole confirmed. "The Krell Empire is unlikely to be the last species to test our patience in this manner." If we continue to respond quietly and discreetly, without clearly and publicly establishing consequences, other species may draw the same perilous conclusions that the Corel initially did. Marsh nodded slowly, acknowledging the gravity of the decision before her. "What precisely are you proposing, Admiral?" Cole straightened slightly, addressing the entire council directly. "A formal policy, clearly established and openly communicated to the broader galactic community. Earth will continue to offer diplomacy first, always, precisely as we have done since our initial entry into galactic society. However, any direct, deliberate act of aggression against Earth or its citizens will be met with an immediate, decisive, and proportionate response. A response intended not merely to defend against the immediate threat, but to permanently remove the capability for such aggression to manifest again. Essentially," Webb summarized, "no more quiet, isolated responses. A clear public standard understood by every observing species." "Precisely," Cole affirmed. President Marsh remained silent for a considerable moment, carefully weighing the significance of the decision at hand. Finally, she spoke. "This marks a genuine shift in how the galaxy perceives us," she said quietly. "No longer simply the patient, benign newcomers willing to endure repeated probing without repercussions." "No," Cole acknowledged. "But it does not signify an abandonment of our core identity, Madam President. We remain steadfastly committed to peace as our primary and preferred choice, always. We are simply making it unmistakably clear that peace, once deliberately and repeatedly violated, carries tangible consequences." Marsh nodded slowly, her decision firm. "Then let us proceed exactly as Admiral Cole suggests. Prepare Earth's forces for whatever response becomes necessary against further Krell aggression. And prepare a formal public statement clearly outlining this new policy for the wider galaxy to comprehend." "Understood, Madam President," Cole replied resolutely as the meeting concluded. President Marsh remained seated for a moment longer, quietly studying the historical files still displayed before her. These were records of humanity's own painful past, lessons learned through centuries of needless suffering, now shaping decisions that affected not only Earth, but potentially the entire galactic balance of power. "We chose peace because we understood its value more profoundly than most," she murmured softly to herself. "Let us hope the galaxy learns to respect that choice, rather than continuing to misinterpret it as weakness." Far beyond Earth's tranquil orbit, preparations continued steadily across human fleets stationed near contested frontiers, maintaining their characteristic patience and discipline, awaiting whatever decision the Krell Empire would render next. They stood fully prepared, should peace once again be refused, to demonstrate clearly and decisively precisely why Earth's patience had never been confused with an inability to permanently conclude a conflict, should such a necessity ever arise. The Krell War Council deliberated for 11 days before finally arriving at a decision. Certain officers, led by General Torv, vehemently advocated for an overwhelming third strike, one so catastrophic that no human stratagem or concealed fleet could possibly withstand it. Others, more subdued and cautious, urged restraint, harboring fears precisely of what Auric had warned them about from the outset. In the end, pride prevailed. A full battle fleet, comprising nearly 60 warships, the most formidable force the Krell Empire had mobilized in over a century, congregated near the border of human territory. This was no longer intended as a mere strike against a convoy or a mining outpost. It was designed to be a definitive final declaration, an overwhelming exhibition of true Krell might, intended to utterly shatter humanity's confidence and irrevocably restore the Empire's wounded honor. High Marshal Oryx stood quietly at the rear of the command hall as the fleet made ready for departure. His expression was heavy with a concern he no longer bothered to conceal. "You still believe this is a miscalculation?" Tessa inquired, standing beside him and observing the same preparations unfold. "I know it is," Oryx stated softly. "But pride rarely heeds reason, especially when it has been wounded twice already." "Then what transpires now?" Oryx's gaze remained fixed on the departing fleet. 60 warships, steadily advancing towards the periphery of Krell space, carrying with them the complete weight of the Empire's honor and identity. "Now," he said softly, "we ascertain precisely the extent of humanity's patience." Aboard the human flagship Meridian, Admiral Cole received confirmation of the approaching Krell fleet with a quiet, unruffled composure. 60 warships, Lieutenant Tanaka reported, meticulously studying the sensor readings. "The largest contingent we have observed from them to date." "They are not attempting concealment this time, Admiral. Full sensor signatures, direct approach, no effort to obscure their presence. They wish for us to witness their arrival." A clear declaration of strength, intended to leave no doubt regarding their resolve. Should we prepare the same tactics as previously employed? Cloaked positioning, encircling their formation? "No, Lieutenant, not on this occasion." Tanaka frowned slightly, surprised. "Admiral? Earth's formal policy has already been established and publicly disseminated across galactic channels. The Krell Empire has been afforded every conceivable opportunity to withdraw peacefully. Instead, they have chosen to escalate for a third time with their largest force, yet fully cognizant of the consequences already demonstrated on 2 prior occasions. Therefore, we shall respond differently this time." Tanaka spoke slowly, comprehension dawning. "We respond precisely as we pledged to the galaxy we would." Cole stated with unwavering firmness. Clearly, decisively, and without further delay. The Krell fleet advanced steadily toward the border world of Aldrin Station, a heavily fortified human outpost situated along their shared frontier. Fleet Commander Torv himself led this assault personally, determined to succeed where Vess and Dressa had both previously faltered. "No concealed maneuvers will aid them this time," Torv declared confidently to his bridge crew. "We outnumber whatever forces they might muster by a significant margin. Even accounting for their prior deceptions, our sheer numbers guarantee victory." As the fleet neared Aldrin Station's outer defense perimeter, sensors immediately registered a substantial human presence. Not concealed, not cloaked, but openly displayed and awaiting. "Commander," reported Torv's sensor officer, "human fleet detected directly ahead. Confirmed count. 40 vessels positioned openly along the station perimeter." Torv offered a cold smile. 40 against 60. Even without deception, the numbers clearly favor us. "Additional contact, Commander," the officer added. "A single vessel approaching directly, broadcasting an open communication request. "Put it through," Torv commanded, intrigued despite himself. The same calm voice that both Vess and Dressa had encountered previously addressed Torv directly, carrying the same steady certainty as before. "Fleet Commander Torv," the voice stated, "you have brought 60 warships to our border following 2 previous defeats, delivered without significant loss of life on either side. We wish to extend to you one final opportunity for peaceful withdrawal." Torv's expression hardened. "We did not come here seeking peace. We came seeking accountability and the restoration of the honor your previous machinations have cost us." "There were no machinations, Commander," the voice replied evenly. "Only patience and the deliberate choice to avoid unnecessary casualties for as long as possible. That choice remains available to you now, precisely as it did for Commander Vess and Commander Dressa before you." "And if we refuse this offer as well?" Torv demanded. There was a brief pause before the voice responded, now carrying a subtle shift in tone, still calm but noticeably firmer than before. "Then you should understand clearly, Commander, that Earth's response this time will differ significantly from our previous engagements." Torv's jaw tightened. "Differ how?" "Previously," the voice explained, "we chose to disable your fleets, allowing your ships and soldiers safe return home, hoping clear demonstration alone would prevent further escalation. That hope has now been exhausted twice. Earth's formal policy, communicated openly across galactic channels 11 days ago, makes clear that further deliberate aggression will be met with decisive, permanent consequences." "You threaten us," Torv stated coldly. "We are simply honoring the warning already given publicly," the voice replied. "This is your final opportunity, Commander. Withdraw your fleet peacefully now, and no further action will be taken against the Krell Empire. Proceed with this attack, and Earth will act to permanently ensure such aggression cannot be repeated." Torv considered this warning carefully, weighing the humiliation of retreat against the possibility of finally demonstrating Krell's strength decisively. In the end, pride, precisely as Auric had predicted, made the decision for him. "We do not retreat," Torv stated firmly. "Krell honor does not bend to threats, however calmly delivered. Prepare for full engagement." "Understood," the voice replied simply, devoid of anger or surprise. "We regret this outcome, Commander," the transmission concluded. The ensuing battle was unlike anything either side had previously experienced. Rather than relying solely on disabling tactics, human forces this time operated with calculated precision, specifically aimed at neutralizing the Krell fleet's capacity for waging war entirely. Precisely as Cole had publicly promised the Krell Empire, weapons systems were systematically targeted and destroyed across every enemy vessel. Engine systems, one after another, were disabled with surgical accuracy, leaving Krell ships adrift and powerless throughout the engagement. Yet, remarkably, casualties remained deliberately minimal. Human forces continued to target equipment and systems rather than personnel wherever feasible, upholding Earth's stated commitment to avoiding unnecessary loss of life even during decisive military action. Within 4 hours, the once formidable Krell fleet of 60 warships had been rendered entirely incapable of further offensive action. Weapon systems destroyed, engines disabled, every vessel left adrift and powerless amidst the wreckage of the Empire's boldest military gamble yet. Commander Torv sat silently in his darkened command chair, staring blankly at the surrounding wreckage of his once proud fleet, finally comprehending fully the profound significance of what Earth's patience had truly represented all along.